All right, the last time that we did a lesson, we talked about principal chords and we were doing bar chord shapes. This time, it's kind of like working backwards, actually. I probably shouldn't have done that because bar chords are a lot more difficult than your standard chords that everyone tends to usually learn first in the open position. To start off with, a lot of times you're going to get a chord book, and this is really a big disadvantage to beginning players. You get a chord book. Someone gets you a chord book, or you buy it yourself and look, here's a guitar chords. And you're looking at hundreds of guitar chords, and it's just overwhelming. It's like, how am I going to learn these? How long is this going to take? And people will start memorizing chords, and it doesn't make any sense. So really the best way that you want to learn chords, and especially in these open positions, is you want to learn them how they relate to one another. So you want to learn them in regard to a particular key, maybe. And when we talked about in the last one, we talked about 1, 4, and 5 chords. It's the same thing with the open position chords. It's just that we're not doing those difficult bar kind of holding patterns. So just start off with a couple very simple keys. In the key of G, your 1, 4, and 5 chords are G, C, and D. Your 1 chord is G, your 4 chord is C, and your 5 chord is D. Now a lot of times you'll also see a 5-7 chord. Okay, so that's just taking that same chord and making it a 7 chord. If you have a chord book, you're going to find this very easily. In this case, D7 would be like this. Okay, so you'll also find in your principal chords a 6 chord, which is a minor chord. In the key of G, this is E minor. Now with these 4 chords, you probably, I don't know how many hundreds of songs you'll be able to play. If we can name songs, Brown Eyed Girl by Van Morrison is one that uses these exact chords in this exact key. He uses the 6th chord, which is the minor. So if you learn those chords, rather than trying to learn all these chords in a row and all this stuff that seems to be just overwhelming, learn a few chords in a particular key. If you take another key in the open position, the key of C, your 1 chord is C, your 4 chord is F, your 5-7 chord is G7, and your 6th chord, the minor chord, is A minor. And with those, I mean, if you just start strumming these together, you're going to hear something, hey, that sounds like something. There's usually a number of ways to play most of these chords, but start off very simply, okay? The F chord is one that's kind of difficult to learn at first because you're using a bar for these 2 strings, these 2 notes, which will eventually become that bigger bar chord that we talked about before. But just start off very simple. And the thing about the fingering of these chords as well is very important, okay? Going back to the G chord, the key of G major, I use this fingering with the 3rd finger on the low G, the 2nd finger on the B, and your 4th finger on the high G note. Now, this might take some practice because really, what do you use this finger for other than, playing guitar? So it might take some training. It might take some getting used to using that. Now, you'll often see this fingering used for this G chord. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you use this fingering that I showed the first time, when you go to your C chord, which is your next chord in the sequence, you're already kind of set up for it, where you're just moving those 2 fingers over, you're going to go back to your G chord, you're going to move them back into that position. So I would recommend doing it this. You can do it this way, it's fine, but I would recommend being able to play your G chord like this. Okay, the same thing with the C, key of C major, your C, you're already set up for the F chord. Move these 2 fingers over, lay this one down for the bar, and then move back to the C if that's where you're going. So again, work with the keys. Don't be overwhelmed and inundated with all these chords I've got to learn. Most of them you're never going to use anyway. Don't worry about them. These diminished and augmented things. Start off with your major keys, these simple open positions, and I think you'll really, really enjoy learning these chords. I'm Steve McClain for Random Acts of Music.